Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Holmes. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we are housekeepers, so we have some housekeeping for you. But this housekeeping it's a good house. We're keeping up a home. So that means we got to take care of it. And what that means is everything that we use to take care of our home is genuinely what we love and value and appreciate. And so to keep up our spiritual home, our body home, and our mind home, we're going to start with our first sponsor, which is Cabin on the Coulee Farm. This is where we go when we want time to read our books, to go on our hikes, and to chop our wood, or just have our conversations amongst ourselves about the end of the world, but at least we're doing it with a really nice view. So you guys can go onto cotc.ca to check out Cabin on the Coulee Farm.
Yes, and they are rated #1 farm stay in Canada, according to trip101.com. And you can book from May to November. It is open season, everybody.
Yeah, and so you can scroll down, and then on the website, you will see that there are 3 options for you, glam sites. The cabin, which holds 6 guests, 3 bedrooms, and 4 beds. It's their largest glam site.
Yeah.
And then you have the Coulee Yurt, which is 5 guests, 3 bedrooms, and 3 beds. Very, very nice interior. It's so nice. And then the Grouse House, which is 4 guests, 1 bedroom, and 2 beds for the smaller experiences.
Yeah.
But you guys will be glad to know that all of these sites now are pet friendly. And that was not always the case when we were doing our previous videos, but now it is. And the reason we know that, and the reason you would know that, is if you checked out Cabin on the Coulee Farm Substack to get all the updates on what's going on with the latest and greatest with this business. And so you guys can get whatever future projects are going forward, and also, funny enough, an interview by the owner of this business with Maddie and I. And you will see that Maddie, we're wearing a particular garment that is...
If you want to get this Alberta jersey, and you guys can find the Alberta jersey on our Buy Me a Coffee, but instead of buying us a coffee, you guys are going to buy us some matcha. And you will see a shop tab on the right. That is where you can get these jerseys to match me and Macy. And if you do, send us a photo. And originally we did these jerseys just for the Alberta patriotism of it.
To infiltrate hockey games.
Yeah. And we were surprised that people from BC wanted to buy these jerseys, and have been, because it turns out it's not about making the money.
It's about sending a message.
And this message is nationwide. And on Nationwide, it dawned on me that our mother is actually a real estate agent. So if people want to capitalize on this Alberta patriotism and the investment that is coming here because of the Alberta movement, my mom can help you out with that transition into our province. If you guys are on the other side and you're not really sure, a bit more uncertain, want more ground somewhere in the US, our mom can also help you with the sale out of Alberta. So I will put her email in the description box for people to capitalize on.
Yeah, you guys know that we are hugely family centric. So when you support our mama homes, you support us as well. And we really, really thank you guys for that. So
yes, and on the last product that we wanted to share with you guys is something that we use on a quotidian basis. This is actually our hair care
and our skincare.
We use South Korean product. It's called Reman. And the reason we use this stuff is because South Korea, they regulate their products heavily, contrary to here in the West, where they allow thousands of products because it's proven efficacious, according to people like the FDA. They have thousands of product that you're not allowed to put in because they know it's not efficacious. So they have much higher standards. And in this particular stuff, the 2 main ingredients are byungpool, which is tiger grass, and they use lava water, which is mineral filled water. It is not dead distilled water.
So healthy products, which we love. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining us in our preamble and this housekeeping to keep all our houses well kept. And without further ado, we can get on with the episode.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. We are very excited because this is our first in-person interview, which I actually need to show everybody. That's Angela. And then we have Judy over here.
Excited. I was like, show me.
And then we have Macy. Not that they haven't seen you a million times.
Yeah,
but,
that's true.
You know. And today we have them on to have a debate on Alberta independence. These are 2 local Alberta ladies, and we thought it's very difficult, which Angela, you can speak better to than I can, on women when it comes to talking about controversial topics, especially politics. they tend to get nervous in the big crowds. They need more time to digest the information, and thus bringing up questions or concerns that they would have at an event per se, not very much in their comfort zone versus, you know, having an in-person dialogue. So me and Macy were like, okay, the women's perspective is clearly lacking on this dynamic and in this big thing, since this is the future of our province we're talking about. And so I, on a whim, sent an email to my CA board and I'm in Fish Creek, and I was like, hey, anybody want to like do a debate? And Judy,
bless you,
bless her, right? She was the only one that stepped up, which doesn't surprise me because she is a very prominent voice on our board and in Fish Creek. So me and Macy were absolutely stoked when she agreed to come on, which she will tell us actually why she agreed to come on, because this is also her first podcast. And so this is that you're not going to get more grassroots than this podcast right here on a subject matter that is very prominent in our province. And so, Macy, do you want to add any more context about why we wanted to do this before we get intros?
Yeah, I'll do a tiny bit. I want to say thank you for coming onto the podcast with us, because as Maddie said, the dialogue is very needed and it needs to be like respectful. You know what I mean? Like we can't be doing the thing where we're shoving anybody in the streets. Like, so
right.
I think that I'm very excited to have you guys and all of us just have a chit chat round table and hear the different perspectives. And I think just to give you our intention as to why we decided to do this is because our channel from the onset has been dedicated to changing axioms and also just trying to understand what it is that you don't know, right? Because a lot of the time people, they'll have their podcast dedicated to all these experts and et cetera, et cetera. But the person behind the desk, like me and Maddie who are doing the hosting, we want to know what it is that we are missing and what it is that we need to keep searching into and deep diving. So I hope that by the end of this, the audience and you guys as well and us as well will walk away going like, wow, like there's a lot more that I need to like research. There's a lot more that I need to investigate, and that's always a good thing because it shows that you're growing and we're not just static in where it is that we think that we are in our place in this world. So that's kind of my last little tidbits. And so just for easy starters, we can, Maddie, who do you want to start with, Angela or Judy?
Let's do Angela. Angela's very experienced at giving her intro.
Yeah, so give a little introduction to the audience of yourself, Angela.
For sure. Yeah, so my name is Angela Tabak, and I live actually in the furthest southwest corner of the province. You just cannot get any further southwest. I look out my window and I see Montana, and then I see Waterton,
right?
Which right behind Waterton is BC, so it just doesn't get any further than that. You know, I've been involved in and studying the Alberta independence movement for 6 years now. Started off with the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta, and that kind of went the way of all Alberta independence parties a few years back. Yeah, and I was kind of left orphaned. But a year and a half ago, my friend Kathy Flett and I started an organization called the Alberta Women's Independence Network. And we are now a TPA, registered as a third-party advertiser with Elections Alberta. That picture right there. I love that picture. We had a bunch of ladies now. That is October in Waterton.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a reason why that place shuts down for the winter. We all got blown off the bluff practically. But yeah, basically what we've been doing is we've been going around the province for the last year and a half, encouraging women and men, we do have men that attend our gatherings, to have the conversation. Just have the conversation. You know, what is not working for Alberta? Why do we have so much discontent? Where does this come from? What is the base of it? What is the root of it? And, you know, we just kind of started it, like just kind of put it out there. I started with my neighborhood. You know, I had some ladies over and I just said, here's some ideas. What do you think? And they were all just like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this. We need to know this. And it just ballooned from there. So for the last year and a half, we have been just driving all around the province, having these in-home meetings and in local cafes and restaurants and some town halls, but mostly focused on the smaller meetings. Again, kind of as you said in your intro, like women, we're different than men. We're created differently than men. We're wired differently. And we have different needs and oftentimes different concerns when it comes to Alberta independence. And I think that stems from the fact that we're the ones that have the babies. We are looking out for our future generations, and we're a little bit more risk intolerant.
Right.
So risk adverse, I guess, is probably the right way to put it, than a lot of men. A lot of men, they can see the situation, they just, let's just fix it. Whereas the women are kind of thinking about, well, what are all the other things that will come with fixing it?
Right.
Because there's no perfect solution. And so that's what we get to discuss when we have these meetings, and it's been absolutely lovely. I just feel like our community of women across the province has just blossomed in the last year or so. I feel like my peeps, I know who my peeps are from every corner of the province, and we are finally starting to see that unity that has been intentionally taken from us as Canadians is coming back to us as Albertans.
That was a very detailed intro.
Well, okay, a little longer than it should have been.
No, that's fine.
Good
No, because
context.
it gives good context for Judy.
I'll overcompensate the other way.
No.
Interested in politics, stay-at-home mom for a good chunk of my adult life. Did poli-sci at university, so always kind of interested in how the politics work. I was telling Madison and Macy that for me it's sometimes more at a 30,000-foot level as opposed to on the ground. I leaned wild rose and like the conservative side of things. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and and so here we are.
Are your parents, like, you grew up in the family, do you mean, did your parents also grow up here in Alberta?
Yeah, my mom and dad were both born just outside of Lacombe.
Oh, wow.
And both from farming families. And my dad was driving teams of horses when he was 6 years old and picking rocks and thistles out of the fields and selling cattle by the time he was 16. So he's always been encouraged he was always encouraged to be work for himself and stand on his own 2 feet. And my mom joined him in those endeavors, and that was kind of the atmosphere we grew up in. When you talk about women not having opinions, strong women in both families, and my dad and I would pull out a pail of ice cream and each take a spoon and just start. Well, what do you think about this one? I don't know. And we'd go through as much ice cream as we needed to sort the issues out. So my sister would leave the room because we'd take opposite sides just for the fun of taking opposite sides. So.
Oh, well, that's lovely. Our family kind of is playing devil's advocate, so to speak. And I like to, when people say I like playing devil's advocate for the sake of, that used to bother me, but it's a fantastic exercise. But not only that, I find that most people, and if you're in a family that was, big in dialogue, which ours is too, we're a family of 7, but it was never honestly for the sake of, because we were actually considering the alternatives, the pros and cons to everything. So it seemed like the sake of, but it's just because of how fast you just think of but what if? And that's actually kind of what we want this conversation to be like is, Judy, you and your dad eating ice cream. There's no ice cream. I apologize.
Shit, had we known?
Right? I don't know.
Get our bowl.
I could have brought the spoons.
Right? Exactly. But we want it to be largely like that, where we can play out the pros and cons, because that's what consideration is. There's a lot of divisiveness going on in Alberta, and even me and Macy have been getting youth testimonies just to get their perspective on it, because it's also their future at hand. And a lot of them are also not happy with the divisiveness. They're like, Alberta independence, great. If we stay within Canada, okay, we got some work to do. But they're like, either way, this whole divide and conquer and us versus them, that's starting to arise, they're not for that. None of the youth are. And so that is one thing that this conversation, we just want it to be a casual. This is how every Albertan needs to be addressing and actually talking about it, because trying to get people to talk about it, they don't want to. It's too controversial, but
Right.
that's a foreign concept to me and Macy, because we, in a household was kind of like Judy's, we didn't have anything we didn't want to talk about. We wanted to talk about everything, to see the pros and cons of everything and what's the context surrounding it. So I don't know if that was the same for you, Judy, but we didn't have a topic we didn't want to touch on. And so controversy for us is kind of, we had to learn that there's controversial things in society.
Yep. And get comfortable with it.
Yes. And so I think the first question I wanted was, me and Macy have told our values and our perspectives, but why did you guys agree to do this conversation? Let's start with Angela and then go to Julie.
Well, I mean, this is what I do. Judy, I love your ice cream story, because one of the taglines, on a lot of our invites and stuff is like, these conversations need dessert.
Oh, yes.
Right? And I think that comes from my Italian mother, where it was, I mean, food was just such an important part, and it brings us together, right? It can bring us together, and there's just something about it. There's a warmth about sharing food. And so this is what I do. This is what I love, is like getting together with folks and just, let's kind of hash it out, but it doesn't have, we can also demonstrate that it doesn't have to be something negative. Mm-hmm. It can be just an exchange of ideas. And I love it when people come to our meetings and they have questions and they have concerns, and I don't know. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I say, I don't know. Let's figure this out together. Mm-hmm. That's why I was so excited when you guys asked me. I was like, oh yeah, it's totally up my alley.
Absolutely. That was the thing. We're like, okay, so she's been talking to women this whole time that have been like concerned and blah, blah, blah. And Judy, being a strong thinking woman, we were like, okay, this is going to be a great.
She's like, don't call me out like that.
I know. She's like, you're setting expectations. What if I don't meet them? So Judy, why did you agree? Why did you, out of the whole CA board, you jumped on it? How come? And why did you agree to come on with?
Because you guys are awesome and you asked.
Oh, that's so cute.
Is it that simple?
Yes, that would probably be the main gist of it. But also, I think discussion of these topics is important. And it's nice to have an opportunity to talk about it.
Well, that's good. Okay, well, I'm glad we could provide the opportunity.
I guess my short little tidbit before we get into the questions then for discussion would be for those that I guess are, maybe a little demoralized with the state of the world, and that's why we're even having these discussions right now, is trying to figure out, well, based on the problems that are occurring, what do we do about it, right? And like, what is the path forward? Because regardless, at the end of the day, the most basic, generous interpretation of what prosperity is, people want it. People do want to be prosperous, right? So, and then it's just the nitty gritties of trying to figure out how do you do that?
Right.
And so, but when we're doing that, even on our CA boards, for example, when me and Manny joined, I think that's one of the reasons why I was so glad that Judy agreed to do this, because I was like, wow, like that just also shows that the rapport that we have built to try and demonstrate ourselves as authentic people that actually really genuinely care and want to have differences of perspectives shown. I'm like, it's showing that the friendships are clearly emerging, and it's lovely. And so I think that for people that are feeling like, oh, is politics going to save us? And I don't know. And it's like, well, it's the friendships that you're cultivating, right? Mm-hmm. It's the community that you're building on top of all it is that you're trying to accomplish in the little CA board meetings when you're getting into the nitty gritties of everything. So yeah, that was my little tidbit. And Maddie, you can go on to the first question if you want to now.
Well, the first question, I suppose, is just to get your guys' overall perspective. So, I mean, Angela, you've been doing this for 6 years, you said. Mm-hmm. I guess getting the starter of why this entered your zeitgeist, and then how did it continue to manifest over time? Because then I also want Judy. You said when I sent the email, you're like, I come more from a philosophical point of view rather than factual, and which is good, because I feel like that's a lot of people. People like to paint that stupid dichotomy where it's like facts don't care about your feelings, but the reality is like nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And so I definitely find that just talking about the facts is not always the way to go, but that I know that people like Chris Scott don't agree with me on that. He says, bring the facts and that's good and all. But when you're talking about something as big as building a potential new nation, you need some values and philosophy behind it. It cannot
100%.
just be, basic numbers. This is what looks good on paper, because you're essentially building a civilization. What is that other than a culture? And so, as Macy said, community. And so I want both of your guys' just kind of first impressions when you're thinking about, like, when I said, let's come on and talk about Alberta independence, your first thoughts and impressions. Judy, would you like to go, or would you like Angela to start?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I guess the place that I come from is that I would like Canada to work.
Right.
As an Albertan, we have family in Saskatchewan and BC and Ontario, and I would like to be in the same country as them.
Right. Right.
I feel when I've traveled around that I have a lot in like I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, we have a different culture here, and we have a
Right.
different set of circumstances here." And when I talk to people from Northern Ontario, they're in the same boat as we are. And when I talk to people in Northern BC, they feel the same way as we do. And so I would like Canada to work. I guess that's my first kind of overview thing. And but there is a but.
Yeah.
And that is that I think that for the first time there are people in Canada that are actually listening when we're saying there are issues here. Like when I listen to Rob Russo from The Economist saying, "Did you know that New Brunswick has more senators than Alberta?
Right.
Why do we
Right.
have that?"
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, if a guy from The Economist that's on CBC can say that out loud, which Albertans, I think, have been trying to get that message across for a long time. And I mean, when you talk about where does it all start for the discontent of Alberta? I'm old enough to have grown up when all of our clothing came from Montreal and all of our washing machines came from Ontario, and you couldn't buy from the States because either you weren't allowed or I think it was more the taxes and the duties and that. And that was definitely to the benefit of Ontario and Quebec as opposed to developing industry
Right.
in Alberta. So
Right.
I understand that there are long-standing issues, but the depth of those issues, I think, has varied. So then maybe I'm going into too much detail, but that's kind of overview. I would like to see Canada would work. I understand why people are frustrated because sometimes it feels like we've been saying the same thing for a long time, but there's just that glimmer of people listening now that I feel like there's hope.
Okay, Angela.
I'm totally with Judy.
Right.
I really am. Like, oh man, I grew up as such a proud Canadian girl and spent a good amount of time in my early 20s actually living in northern Belgium and the Netherlands. And, I'll just never forget riding my bike through that beautiful Belgian countryside and coming across those military cemeteries, the Canadian military cemeteries. Right. I mean, the John McCrae Cemetery is one of my favorite ones. And walking through there and just feeling so much pride in these young men who gave it all for our freedoms. And only later on to kind of see that we've lost that. We've lost it in Canada. I think that Canada no longer exists. I would love for it to be able to come back. I would love for folks all across the country to open their eyes and take a look at the situation that we are in and that we have been in for a very long time. And understand that, hey, we do need to make some changes, and that's not necessarily easy, but if we're going to keep this country together, we've got to make some very serious changes, and we've got to do it quickly. Because when I look at how out of control our federal government is at this point, if things don't change real fast, we're going to get to the point of no return, where we will be saddling future generations with so much debt and, we're losing our freedoms incrementally. And that was really the thing that got me into this. COVID happened. At that time, I was kind of doing the single mom thing. I was working 3 jobs to support my daughter and I, and all 3 jobs disappeared. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And for the first time, I was taking money from the government just to pay the bills. And I was like, this is unbelievable.
Right.
And I kept looking out my window, and what I was told was happening, I was not seeing that in my community. And so anyways, it gave me lots of time to start doing some research and some reading. And that's, of course, when I came across the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta and what they stood for when it came to bodily autonomy, property rights, personal rights and freedoms, that type of thing. And I could very easily see, and as COVID progressed throughout, not the illness, but the situation of COVID progressed throughout and we had our prime minister pretending to have COVID hiding in his wherever while the people of the country were trying to get his attention and get the attention of our leaders and say, hey, look at, like, things are not right here. We were shown right there and then as Albertans and as Westerners that don't even bother trying. Don't try. Because we're not going to listen to you anyways. And so that's kind of what has really fueled me. But ultimately, I'm with Judy. I would love, 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 love to see our country come together, and for the people of the country to come together, to find a vision once again, and to be unified under that vision with some shared values, ethics, beliefs, and to go forward from there.
Maddie,
Jinx.
I got so much I could ping off of. So, I mean, firstly, I want to make sure that I'm clear, hearing you guys, so that way, we feel like we are understanding. So when I'm listening to Judy, it sounds like it's one of those things where there's people across the country where you feel like they are facing similar issues that we're facing. When Angela, you allude to the freedoms that are being taken away, right? That's not just necessarily only towards Albertans, right? That's all of Canada's. These bills are federal, right?
Right.
So all of Canada was probably going to be suffering from a lot of freedom of speech being taken away, from their internet access, et cetera, right? So it sounds like from Judy, you're like, there is a unifying ethos in that sense, where we are all kind of collectively suffering under this new regime, kind of. And then it sounds like what you're kind of advocating for is that you wish that, yes, it would work, that Canada could stay united, kind of using that, actually, like the collective suffering is kind of the fuel for the fire to make some changes. It sounded like you were saying that there's people now that are recognizing things that Albertans specifically have been saying for a long time that necessarily have not recognized it, from your knowledge, like the CBC individual, right? And so I guess my question for that, and then it can kind of tag off of Angela as well, is when there is sort of that feeling like there is more recognition, does it kind of give you a feeling like if we do get more recognized, and if we do kind of have more people that otherwise were not paying attention to Alberta now paying attention, and the collective ethos that's going on with what Angela was alluding to, this whole regime that's coming through the federal government, if people are getting more aware of it, then there could be a chance for Canada to be salvaged. Is it kind of fair to say that you feel like that'd be something that is something you're thinking about?
I don't know so much. I think across the country we have people who are noticing the lack of freedoms, who are trying to put food on the table, who are living day to day, and maybe not caught up in the, gosh, how do we build this country? Like they're, it's not that they're wanting to go to that place, but if they can at least recognize, and actually, one thing that I think is happening is he who shall not be named is falling into the category of he who shall not be named, because so many people are starting to recognize the damage that's been done over the last 10 years when we had the second Trudeau. I think a lot of people didn't get it with the first Trudeau, but I think with the second Trudeau, people are now going, wow, like this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem, and we're all dealing with it because we allowed a government to be run by a very small group of people with a unique ideology that did not reflect the values of the whole country, but we gave them the power to do whatever they wanted to do. And when I say I want Canada to work, but I think that there need to be changes, I think that, and I'm not sure how we find that way, but we can't ever let that happen again. Like, we can't ever let the power be so concentrated that someone could come in like another Trudeau. And we've shown through 3 elections that we're capable of electing people who are less competent at the job than they should be.
Nice euphemism.
Thank you. So I think that's where the work needs to be. Like, I think that's where we need to be able to sit down and I mean, I know we've tried elected Senate, and there wasn't a lot of appetite in the country for any type of change like that. But maybe it's the provincial governments having some type of an accessory power or a veto. I mean, I don't know what the solutions are, but I think that if we're going to hold the country together, and I think there are people who want the country to stay together, that it's like that live outside of Alberta, that it's fair to say, guys, then it can't just be tyranny of the majority. Like, there's a reason that the idea of democracy was rejected in some ways in the early US, because it means that whoever has the most people gets to make the decisions, even if they're making bad decisions.
Right.
So there has to be some counter to that tendency. And I don't know if there are enough people in the country to be interested in that, but I think that's the type of direction that we have to figure out whether we can get enough people from Prince George and Prince Rupert and Northern Ontario. And I mean, if you look at the Maritimes, I mean, I know right now that they just, suck in the federal money like but PEI didn't join Confederation for 3 years. Nova Scotia never wanted to join Confederation initially because they were concerned that the power would be concentrated in Quebec and Ontario. So it's not like it's a new issue, and it's not like it's a uniquely Albertan issue. But I think Alberta has the ability to lead the charge and say, listen, guys, if we want to make this truly a amazing country, and it already is an amazing country in many ways, but if we really want to make it work, then we've got to step up and deal with X, Y, Z, A, B. Well, maybe we start a little A, B, C. Anyway.
Angela, do you want to comment on that?
Again, I'm with you, Judy. I believe that we are kind of beyond. I mean, we've created a welfare state. You mentioned the Maritimes. Some of those provinces, 20 to 30% of their provincial budget comes from equalization. We've created a situation where if we want change, we're asking those folks to really have to make some deep changes to make it work for them and to work for the rest of the country. And as much as I have loved Canada growing up and being Canadian, when I look back at how we began and, the Westminster system from the very beginning, the Westminster system, when you look at it and how it was used in Britain, had very different reasons for being than what we had in Canada. We did not have an aristocracy to protect in Canada. And the Westminster system with the Senate was put in place exactly for that reason. And so from the very beginning, we have been set up in a flawed way for a country this size. I always ask folks, like, what's the biggest country on the planet? Well, it's Russia, right? Okay, second largest is Canada. There's a reason why Russia, again and again and again, has fallen into communism or some form of it. Because to govern an area that large, with the diversity of people and cultures and languages that we experience here in Canada, they also experience there. It's very, very difficult to have a proper democracy And like you mentioned, to not fall into the tyranny of the majority. And so while my deep down hope would be that we would somehow, for the sake of Canada, be able to make some really deep changes, and they would be deep structural changes. You know, we got a pipeline. Yay! This is not about a pipeline. The pipeline situation is a symptom of these much deeper problems that we need to have addressed. And it's not like Western Canadians have not brought this to the rest of the country over and over and over again to say, hey, we need to change this. We need to have a Triple E Senate. You know, it's not working. It's a giant money pit right now at best. And at worst, it is where democracy goes to die because of just the way that it's set up. And so, yeah, wow. While I join you in that hope of could we really address these issues and fix them? I am skeptical just because of what we have created with, again, the welfare idea, and where some provinces are very dependent on other provinces just for their basics. And are folks around the country, are there enough folks around the country that are willing to make those very deep systemic changes where it would work?
Yeah, I do hear you, and I don't know the answer to that question, obviously.
Right.
One thing I would suggest with the Senate is that my understanding is it was set up with the idea of having a house of sober second thought. Mm-hmm. Going by some of the decisions that are made in the House of Commons, it's not a bad idea that we have a house of sober second thought. But it would need to be, if it was to continue, it needs to be rebalanced. And just kind of as an aside, I'm not even sold on that senators need to be elected, because I know there was one woman who was appointed from Alberta who did not have the resources to have been able to run an election campaign. But when they went through her resume of what she had done and who she was and what she had accomplished, I'm thinking, well, I'm glad they found her, because she sounds like a very wise person, even if she may not be. And I mean, we've also shown that elections get us people like Trudeau. True. So you don't necessarily need, you know, maybe there's a blend there where something is, you know, if it's the Senate that stays in place, it's somehow more balanced. But at some point, we do need to find, well, I don't know the answer, but I think, you know, I do hear what you're saying about maybe we've gone too far, but the Maritimes to me are not the biggest issue, other than the fact that PEI gets, you know, 4 elected politicians for 1 in Alberta. I mean, we're never going to have complete balance. We have the same thing in Alberta, right? Where Northern Alberta elects with less people a representative that's, you know, but they're a big area and they need representation. So I realize there are times when you're not going to have it completely balanced. But the thing that struck me was, when I've been thinking about this, you know, do we stay? Do we go? Do we stay? When Harper was in power, now I realize, for you youngsters that are running the video or the podcast, this is way, way back in your history. But I mean, I didn't wake up in the morning going, oh, good grief, what's going to happen today? Life was just good. I focused on other things. There was life to do, right? And if I go back before Trudeau, whether it was Chrétien, until we found out he was stealing a whole bunch of stuff, but, you know, but before that, and Paul Martin and Joe Clark, and I mean, these were people who you kind of went, okay, I think that they've got a handle on these complex issues, and I'm okay with, no, it's not quite what I want. This isn't quite working, but generally, it's a good place to be, and you move forward, right? So when I look at that in the scope of the country, I think, well, because we've had 11 horrendous years do we throw away the other 100 and however many? Actually, we joined in 05, didn't we? So I guess it's not that long, but the other 110.
Yeah.
Right.
And
That's a fair question. I think you're not the only Canadian asking that. Even David Redmond, I think he was a colonel in the Canadian Army, and he also says the same thing. You know, the fact that yes, we've had some bad years since these presidents or prime ministers, sorry, but prior, he's like, history of Canada is good and worth fighting for. Now, Angela, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Macy and I have done a lot of research into Canadian history, and even the names like Cartier that you named, Paul Martin. The thing that, Judy, you bring up the point of elections, and that's a very good nuance perspective, because looking at elections only work with an educated populace. And if you don't, so people that are following regularly, who am I voting for? You know, the fact that even our municipal turnouts are terrible in terms of voting. So we have a population that thinks voting once every 4 years is being involved. And even then, I think that might be a stretch, and I think it's been a stretch for a long time. When you're busy trying to just do your daily life, politics, it seems like a background thing. It's very few people that understand that politics happens to you if you don't happen to it. And when it comes to even elections, people like Mark Carney and Cartier, like these were all people that were part of different organizations that Macy and I have looked into, like even the Bilderberg Group. The Bilderberg Group was set up by British politicians and British lords way back when. And so when, Angela, you allude to the Westminster system, yes, that was, people say that the whole Privy Council and the Westminster, it was just guidelines for Canada, but it's all symbology now. Meanwhile, 90% of even the prime ministers that got into Canada, they were sponsored by the UK prime minister and the same organizations. And that's stuff that me and Macy have looked into and realized, okay, now what do we think of that? Are we okay with that? Some people, looking at even the history, we tend to follow the footsteps of the UK. So we were not just made as like a blueprint or a little guideline off of them. We literally follow most of their laws, their bills that pass. So even the censorship ones, that like Bill C9 that's going through right now, Mark Carney didn't just come up with those. He got those from the UK and the European Union. They did it first. And so we're just downstream, is how I'm seeing it, downstream of another system, another entity. But I didn't sign up for that entity. And I mean, from the very beginning. And so when it comes to, and this is one thing that I want your guys' opinion on, because it's something I'm trying to reconcile. Because when we talk about this problem of Alberta, there's this dichotomy of a lot of the people that want to make Canada work, of which I'm one of them. Like I know people, we have family members and friends that are like, well, my family's in Saskatchewan, my family's in BC. And even Macy and I were selling Alberta jerseys, and we have people buying Alberta jerseys from BC across Canada. We're like, why are you doing that? That's weird. Well, it's because there is a sense of unity across Canada. And I wouldn't want to take that away from anybody. Where I get stuck is in the solutions, like Judy, like it's a complicated system. Though the people that we've elected have definitely shown they don't know the solutions either. I'm trying to look at it and go, knowing the history and knowing people want to still save Canada, or not even Canada. One thing I think we need to start doing is separating Canada from Canadians. I don't feel loyal to Canada, but I feel loyal to Canadians. And then looking at the history, some people don't know about the underpinnings, the roots of the system. They see that it was mostly good because they didn't have to think of anything other than their daily life prior to Trudeau. But does that mean, and this is my question, does that mean that everything else that we didn't look at is permissible, or was it good? If you don't look at something, was it actually good, or was it just good enough not to look at? And I'm like, okay, does that mean we continue to ignore it, or do we look at it? Would it help us find solutions going forward? And this is something I'm trying to think about when talking to other people, because I don't want to be an anti-Canada party. But I want solutions. And thus far, some of the hoping for solutions from a system that I know has never, me personally looking at it, I would say John Diefenbaker was the only actually good prime minister Canada has. Now that might be very pessimistic. I didn't live through some of the times. I'm looking at it from a historical point of view, doing the research.
Except he cancelled the Avril Arrow.
Right? Right? So even he wasn't perfect. Absolutely, right? So, but for looking for solutions, my brain goes to these points and I'm like, okay, how do we reconcile this? And is that an unreasonable perspective for me to have and then to consider? Like, what are your brains going on?
Let's start with Angela.
I don't think it's unreasonable at all. And the more we know, I think we're in a better position to make good choices, to make good decisions, that type of thing. And so, like, kudos to you guys for, like, really digging into the history of it. And I don't think I've gone as far as you guys have down that rabbit hole. But yeah, really looking into, some of the stuff that Susan Kokinda from Promethean Action, that type of stuff has brought to light.
Right.
I find her stuff very fascinating. And as she describes, the British Empire, basically, and its continued influence upon Canada, as an example, I can absolutely see it. This really comes down to, we can really kind of drill down to particular principles. And one of the principles of good governance is that the government that is closest to the people is the most effective. It is the best, right? So, for example, if my county councillor lives right down the road from me.
Right.
If they do something and I am awake enough and aware enough to keep an eye on what is going on in my own surroundings, whether it's going good or whether it's not, that's one part of my responsibility as a citizen. But then I also have the opportunity to call him up and say, hey, what's going on? Or, that type of thing. I cannot, I have a lovely MP. He's a lovely gentleman. But the thought of writing him a letter to say, hey, I'm not happy about what's going on in Ottawa would be an absolute waste of time. He's not part of the Liberal government, and it just feels like it doesn't matter. We had what our efforts are. It doesn't really matter. We have a situation that just came up where 250,000 Canadians wrote to their senator, and where did those letters end up? In boxes somewhere, I don't know, was it the basement of the Senate? I don't know. But it never got to them.
The Vatican of the Senate.
There you go. So, it's gotten to the point where it's like, what is the point? And so I am 100% on board that as citizens, it is our duty to understand the history, to take some time. And I would totally agree with you that the very system that we have been built upon, that this country has been built upon, there was no other place that it could end up than where we are right now.
Right.
Just because of the flaws of it. And so I lived through those years too, Judy, where things were just good. You just went along. And yes, we've had 11 bad years, but why have we been able to have 11 bad years? And my goodness, we sent how many thousands of trucks to Ottawa to try and put a stop to it? And they hid from us and ignored it. Did anything change? Sure, they say a few things changed. Some of those mandates were removed or whatever. But when it comes to the actual basis of how the country is run, and why these things have been able to occur and to happen, and there's nothing stopping them from doing the same right now.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Can I?
No, please,
Yes, please.
please. I was about to go to you anyway.
There is nothing to stop it from happening again, which is, I think, something that needs to get fixed.
Right.
You said that you think it's inevitable that we got to this place. And the Westminster connection, the original British thing. I think what happened early that I think tweaked things is that the British system was set up not only to look after the elites and the lords.
Right.
Britain fits inside Alberta, I think.
Right.
And when the people in, when the Plains of Abraham happened in that, the English went, okay, there's 10 of us and there's 1,000 of them, and we can't run this the way we would run Britain because we don't have similar. So right off the get-go, there were concessions to different cultures, to different backgrounds to make it work. And I think that kind of laid a groundwork for something that's pretty unique. Like when you look at the number of countries that are killing each other because they're from two different cultures, and we've managed as a country to figure out a way to either ignore each other or tolerate each other, but stay in the same country and fight wars together. And and even that was maybe that wasn't a good example, but to share industry and share the country. I heard someone refer to it as a loose confederation, that right from the get-go, the founders knew that there was no way that they could effectively make decisions for BC and PEI and lump them all and treat them all the same way. And so our original format was that the provinces, getting back to what Angela was saying about the need to have your government close at hand, that's why education and roads and industry is all supposed to be looked after provincially. I'm not sure how we let that go. I'm not sure how it felt like it was this, the environment is the whole world and the air's going from province to province, so we better run it all. and I don't know whether it was that simple, that the courts went, yeah, we should give you all the power. Like, I don't know if it was that simple a decision or whether it's been more complicated and more long-term. But like when I hear Danielle say we want a sovereign Alberta within Canada, I think I love Saskatchewan. They don't really make any pronouncements. They just do it.
Right.
Right? They don't say we're going to be a sovereign Saskatchewan within Canada. They just say, no, we're just not going to give you that tax. Throw me in jail. That's okay. And they just kind of do it. And the history of BC, like when our first governor was there, is brilliant. But we don't celebrate being different and yet being able to figure out how to work together. And even the initial ability to not kill each other, for the French and the English to not kill each other when they were warring in Europe and they were warring throughout, the U.S. and that, is really quite an accomplishment. And if we can just, I don't think we're that far away from it. I appreciate that it's been 11 years, and I appreciate that the welfare state is problematic, but it feels like there's some good roots if we can just, how sometimes you kind of just need to shave the plant off and wait for the roots to grow back? I don't know. But it's, I guess I just have a little bit of hope that.
We've deferred largely on probably the cons, and the problems that are with Canada. Now, the thing is that Macy, even I've heard from younger friends, is that we kind of all agree that there's problems. There are a lot of Canadians that recognize there's problems. Same with the youth. They're like, okay, can't afford a home, groceries or gas, pick. But the biggest contention is like, okay, the solution. So do we stay or do we go? Now, one of the questions that I want to ask you both is, I want you guys to play out what you personally believe the consequences, and that can be good and bad, the consequences of staying in Canada and the consequences of going. So, maybe Angela, let's start with you. What do you think the consequences of staying and going are?
Good and bad.
Good and bad. Okay.
Hence, I used consequence instead of risk. Consequence is just like a ripple. A ripple is not good or bad. It just
is.
It just is. So same with consequence. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, the consequence of staying is that we just get more of the same. This last election, federal election, showed me that I don't think there is any turning this boat around. The federal Liberals were able to once again use the tool of fear-mongering to scare folks into re-electing them on something that I don't even think is a threat at all, or never would have been a threat had they not, grabbed onto that and run with it. And so the consequences of that is that Albertans will continue to have to fight and scratch and claw to be able to build our industry, which, by the way, is a benefit and a blessing to the whole country. But we are going to have to continue to scratch and claw and fight for that. When we look at this new pipeline announcement, it is astounding what we as a province have to do in order to build a frickin' pipeline. It's unbelievable. And so it will just be more
approximately $43 billion, apparently.
of taxpayer money.
Of taxpayer money. That's the thing.
And then, of course, it will be more than that. Right? And not only that, we're going to jump through all these different hoops for these environmental regulations that other countries have walked away from.
Right.
I've realized this is not working. One, it's not doing what it was ever promised to do. And two, it is handcuffing industry that is needed around the world, and especially with our Alberta oil and our standards that we use to produce it. So that to me is the consequence that we're just going to get more of the same, to the point where the debt becomes so crippling that it just horrifies me to think of what we're leaving to our children and our grandchildren. Now, the consequence of leaving, it is not without consequence. And it really bothers me when people are like, oh, you're not going to pay taxes, you're not going to do this and that. That may or may not be true.
Right.
A couple of different things. My hope would be that by leaving, that it becomes the great reset that the rest of Canada needs, that it's the wake-up call that they need to pull themselves out of the situation that we find ourselves in, and that as Albertans, that we are finally able to truly build our industry, but not, that's a great thing to talk about, but also go back to some of the many values that the province of Alberta was built on. I'm in agricultural country, ranching country. I see how hard those folks work. It would be an embarrassment to them to be taking welfare from another part of the country. You would do everything you can to avoid that situation, because that is a value, that you are self-sufficient, that you provide for yourself, you provide for your family with hard work. And if something happens in the community where someone is not able to do that, we all step up and we help them in that time of need, right? So there's a self-sufficiency, but then there's also this generosity and caring for each other and community. So a consequence that I could see of Alberta choosing to leave is that we regain unity that has been taken from us quite intentionally over the last 5-6 decades, that we are able to kind of come back to those values and demonstrate the importance and the value of those values, and that we're finally able to move forward. Now, bad consequences, you said it's not risk, but there is some risk involved, right? Things could be bumpy for a little while we get things figured out. We don't know how the rest of Canada is going to choose to respond. Nor can we be responsible for that. That is on them, how they would choose to respond if Albertans were to express the desire to leave and to say, we're sorry. We don't see it getting better. We're going to go our own way.
Judy, consequences of staying, consequences of going. What you think? I know. It's not meant to be.
Get the ice cream.
Yeah, right?
Get the ice cream. This is where you get a really big scoop and you suck on it for a little while.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a
Maybe
great
another
question.
scoop. So much of it is not predictable. There's definitely the possibility that if we stay, people go, okay, so there was nothing really wrong. And we are right back where we are right now. I think some of that will be determined in October, not only by the referendum question, but by the other, or the separation question on the referendum, but also by the other questions on the referendum, which I think we need to put a lot more energy into publicizing. Because if we say no more equalization, like, I realize we've already voted on that once and it was, what, 60%?
Yeah.
But if it's higher, if we want our own police force, if we decide to go with, different immigration rules, like, I think that even those votes, if those votes were strong, it would send, I mean, it should get at least, an hour or two's worth of federal airtime before they go back. So I think that one of the consequences could definitely be exactly what Angela's saying, that it will be more of the same if we stay. What is the upside of that? Well, we don't have to get new passport pictures, The concern for me with leaving, or the consequence with me of leaving, again, is the not knowing. What will Canada do? A lot of businesses don't. I mean, we listen to businesses talk and they're saying, well, one of the reasons we want to be in Canada is because it gives us access to the US. Well, those businesses probably aren't going to locate in Alberta if we don't even have access to Canada. And I appreciate that there's interprovincial trade barriers and that complicates things, but at least there's the opportunity to say, we can set up here and here and here and here and here all across the country. And perhaps that disappears depending on the response by Canada. Would we potentially have lower taxes? Would we potentially grow our industry? Would there be companies who come here because we're more free market? Would we be able to be more free market? One of the concerns that I have with some of the independence leaders,
Right.
is their willingness to suggest that if you don't agree with them, I'm sorry, you don't say you're going to take the premier out. Like, you just
I totally agree. Totally agree.
come on, really? Oh, I want to vote for you because I want freedom of choice. Really? Like, this is like there's so many. What would be the Constitution? What would be the values? What would be the voting system? Like, it's so many things to navigate that I guess I don't know. It's a lot of unknowns, and I think that to assume because we are a smaller entity, we will get it right is a problematic assumption, because I think even in small groups we're capable of really doing dumb things, and it just can get exponentially worse the larger the group. But I do think that we could. I mean, maybe it'd be great. Maybe we'd, have great leaders and be very diverse and tolerate all points of view and still get done everything we want to get done. I just don't know. Okay,
one of my final questions, speaking of this referendum, vote that's coming up in October, it was funny because I saw there was the Forever Canada group or whatever.
Yep.
They're putting up signs, but the signs say something like remain in Canada or vote to stay, no to the 9.
Yeah.
No to the 9. Which I see, Judy, you're shaking your head, and that I
So weird.
well, so that because they don't want to leave Canada, they think the rest shouldn't be addressed. But clearly, what I'm hearing from you, Judy, is that the rest, like policy
Must
changes,
be.
must be addressed. Okay, so there's a problem, and just the extremism of going no to all of them because you're worried about one thing. Okay, so we're not for that. Second thing, dynamic to it, is that question regarding it's not actually a should we leave Canada vote. Unfortunately, it's not binding. It's not a should we leave Canada vote. So Judy, when you're talking about Angela is echoing something that I've heard, which is using this movement kind of as like a lever. The rest of Canada also needs changes. They're going to suffer equally, as Macy and Judy, you said at the very, very beginning. They're suffering equally from all of this. But welfare state is not benefiting them because they too are not developing their industry then. Like, there are tons of resources across Canada. We're blessed. Why aren't we using it? And that's not just Alberta, that's every province. That being the case, my question, Judy, largely for you, because this is the question that I think a lot of people that are echoing your sentiments, is with all of that context in mind, the question on the referendum being, should we start taking steps to pursuing a question? That is not a vote to leave. For me, that is a yes to even the people on the fence, because it is a signal to the rest of Canada, like you alluded to earlier. It gives them an opportunity to follow suit. If you said Alberta is kind of the vanguard, the first off the front lines, shouldn't even Albertans that are with the unknowns vote yes on this non-binding referendum to send a signal to the rest of Canada to say it's possible, you can be thinking about this too, and then encourage the collaboration of like the premiers across to then start the discussions. So don't you think that should be just a straight up yes because it's not even a binding question? What do you think?
No.
No?
I think that the question was a way to get something as close to a do you want to stay or do you want to go on the ballot this October so that there would be direction. I don't see it as a, well, do you think we should think about it some more? I think it's and I know that it's kind of worded that way, but to me a yes vote on that is I think we should be looking at separation. And doing whatever we need to do to leave the country. And I think a no vote is, I don't think we should be considering separating. I would love it if one of the questions was, do you think we should rework the whole Canadian Constitution? But, would be really chaotic. So that would be my say is I think if you vote yes, you're saying you want to separate. And I think one of the reasons for getting it onto the fall ballot was to get some clarity on where the province wants to go. Because I think otherwise you're leaving your businesses in limbo. And I think that that's consequential too. If you don't know whether you're in or you're out and you leave it that you don't know whether you're in or you're out for the next 5 years, there are businesses who will go elsewhere.
Okay, and then final thing was, do you think that you alluded to the biggest thing for you with potentially leaving is just the fear of the unknown? Mm-hmm. Do you think, so when it comes to voting in elections, a lot of time I hear people say, better the devil I know than the devil I don't know. Should we be voting for the devil we know, which is to stay in Canada, versus the devil we don't know? Is that how you're going to vote?
I don't know yet.
Don't know yet?
I mean, as you said, opportunity for discussion. And I mean, it concerned me when I heard Trevor Toombs say that industry will leave if we vote yes. That concerned me because I think we do want a strong economy. And then I talked to another gentleman who said, yeah, but as long as our taxes are low, people are going to come. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he's right. And I don't know.
So my remark on that would just be they've already left. As in, a lot of investment is already gone. That's why we're socializing a pipeline, because we can't actually get private investors because of the regulations that we have. And that's like not me trying to be like contentious and like downplay your thought. No, it's
No,
more like,
I don't take it that way.
It's more like the reality of, unfortunately, just where we are, which we can pretty much agree upon, which is it's not a great place. And I think that some of the, as I'm listening to your guys' responses, some of the things that are just popping up in my head is the 11-year period of turmoil that we've been facing, right? We were having an interview with Tanya Clemens, who is an Alberta proponent as well, and she was just saying that, like, the thing that she would rather take a risk on is the risk of the uncertainty and the unknown of what a potential new country could look like versus the risk of what we know is coming down the line with the regulations that are showing up. Because I think that that's one of the things of the physical realities of what these bills are looking like. It's not meant to be fear-mongering. It's just simply looking at what we were talking about with the history of the continuity of the Westminster system and then the British Empire, and what does the UK look like, and is Canada following suit? And it's like, if we're looking at what's going on in the UK and the other Commonwealths, to kind of take a look at, even during COVID, our most recent historical example of what happened in Australia with the mandates, and then how it basically copy and paste here. It's like, they've been allowed, as you said, Judy, to get away with things that have not, like, should have never been allowed to get away with at all, right? And so then when we're talking about things like Senate reform and even the questions that you said are like the 9 questions, which is so weird that people who want to stay would not want to address those questions either. but those questions are important because, yes, it's trying to figure out what can we do to solve then, so that way this doesn't happen again, so that way we can have maybe a better Senate, maybe better judges, et cetera, right? I think that one of the things that I hear commonly in the independence movement is that it's going to be very difficult to try and get 50% of the other provinces to agree to change the Constitution. You're saying that there's some people where they could be convinced and we could just try to keep on going with that movement. I am also looking at time, though, being a younger person. So this is where my kind of context comes in. And time-wise, the amount of time it's going to take to try and get the rest of those people that you were talking about to get their friends to, it's already hard to try and do it here in Alberta. And we are apparently leading the vanguard. Now try all the other provinces who are not thinking about it the way that, you alluded to, where life was good. And so, as Maddie was saying, it's like, well, is it to the point where it's good enough not to think about? And it's like, that's unfortunately the case for still a lot of people. They're exactly where Judy was years ago, today, still thinking, oh, Carney's not bad and it's good enough, right? But for my generation, and looking especially of where Alberta is and the potential that we could be, and what kind of gravitates me towards the independence movement, is that time factor, is looking at...
We can't afford a house now, let alone in 10 years.
Looking at the bills, looking at the lack of investment, looking at the fact that we can't do anything that it is that we want to be setting out to do. And as much as I would love to campaign and petition for, as we've all been alluding to, the education of a populace. Like, you can't have a good democracy without an educated populace. So I would agree. The rest of Canada, if I could appeal to you to do anything, it's continue to, I would say that I would like you to continue the discussion of what would it look like if we were separate, and what does it look like if we're in it? Because if we don't look at what it looks like if we're separate, then we do get caught, I think, in that loop of, it's good enough, we're in survival, and it's all, like, at least I can survive. And it's like, but that doesn't mean you're thriving. And it doesn't, because the Commonwealth state has set it up where you are not thriving. You are surviving, but that's not what I want. Why would human beings on Earth, on the planet, want just to be surviving and not thriving for something higher than themselves, and for the cultivation of their spirits and their mind and their creativity and the potential that's in their ground, right, to spring forward? So that's where I think of it on like the physical reality of what's coming, and that scares me. And then I think of it and the timeline it would take to try and convince all the other provinces. That's kind of terrifying. Not impossible, and not, I shouldn't say unadmirable either. It is very admirable pursuit, and I like, Judy, that you're alluding to it, because that's the whole point of our podcast, is education. But I do look at it, and I think that I would rather the risk of the unknowns of what could of what an independent country would look like, as opposed to where it is that we're going. Because when we have done our deep diving, as Maddie is alluding to, and then that's the extra homework and research that all Canadians should be doing, is why has this been allowed to happen in the first place, right? Was it an accident? And from just Angela, which you're talking about, it sounds like it wasn't. It's not an accident the way it is. And that's something that Maddie and I have also dug into. And as we're seeing, it's being painted on other countries that are in the Commonwealth and other provinces and other places in the world. You were talking, alluding to the conflicts in other countries. And it's like, well, at least we can learn to, like, you know, ignore each other or at least get along. It's like, Maddie and I's channel has also been dedicated to Operation Gladio type stuff. And when we go into that, that starts going into the deeper stuff of like those wars and those terrorist organizations, they came also from the West, as in we have infiltrations that are happening all over, including in our own country. And so it's a lot of a bigger picture of like tentacles kind of thing that are enmeshed in this nasty, nasty system. And it's not to downgrade Canadians or the Canadian.
It's not Canadians.
It's not Canadians that made that system. It's not Canadians that asked for that system. But it's now Canadians
that are dealing with
that are dealing with that system. And I'm one of the younger ones where I'm like, I don't want this system. Like, yeah.
But my cynicism is that people that want to manipulate things will find a way. So even if you set up a new country, you are still going to end up with politicians that want power, people that want their own way. Like, that's the baser part of human nature. And I don't think there's a country in the world that has learned how to avoid it. You know, and I'm not sure whether, I mean, maybe it does work great, and you get this petro superpower, and away we go, and we're another Switzerland, and boom, Bob's your uncle, and everybody's happy. But I think we have to be cautious that we don't assume that all motives will be honorable, and that, because I think there's that tendency still to. Can I throw in one other question?
Please.
This is
for Angela.
Yeah, this is for Angela. You mentioned our unity has been taken from us over the last 50 years. I'm really curious what that means.
So when we look at, and this is something that I've kind of done a little bit of a deep dive into over the winter, which is very interesting. So I'll just give a little background. So in thinking about Alberta independence, and a lot of the questions that I've heard from women are very similar to ones that you have brought up, Judy. Like, well, what will this look like? And how do we know that we're going to get it right? And those types of things. So we came across a paper that was written by Colonel David Redman, who was already mentioned earlier. And this paper he wrote back in 2024 was basically a call to Canadians to come back to what we used to have. And he describes how in the early 1970s, there you go. Yes. What was the name of his paper? If you just scroll up a little bit. Canada 2024, a confident, resilient nation or a fearful, fractured country. Brilliant paper, not super long, but he basically goes back. He describes how in the early 1970s, how he was training to become a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. And one of the courses that he had to take was on the 6 national interests. And these 6 national interests were part of a vision that politicians used to have. It was like a 25-year vision. It wasn't like, are you going to vote for me next week? That was not their vision. Their vision was like, this is what Canada could become and could be over the next 25 years based in these 6 national interests. And the first one that he mentions is unity. So what my group did was we put together a series of interviews with Colonel Redman, as well as other experts in their various areas that had to do with these 6 national interests. So I interviewed him about unity, and the idea of multiculturalism came up, and I kind of dug into it. Now, as a kid, I remember, so Fort McMurray, we moved there when I was 11 years old, and, I finished my high school and graduated in Fort McMurray. I believe that my high school was probably the most diverse across the country. Because of the oil sands, we had so many people from all around the world coming, and their their parents are working at the plants, and their kids obviously are going to school with us. We thought nothing of it. We had folks from literally all over the world that I went to school with. And I remember it was Heritage Days in August. There's probably the August long weekend. We would all go down to the Rotary Park, and there would be all these different booths where these different groups, cultural groups, would share their food and share their music with the rest of the community. And it was something where we celebrated each other. It was so much fun. I looked forward to it every year, and a lot of my friends from school were involved in these groups. And it was just this wonderful, beautiful thing, right? And then multiculturalism was instituted as an actual facet of Canadian government and Canadian policy. And when you go back and you read some of the things that were said for and against multiculturalism, and when the government who put it in and made it policy, there was these debates back and forth in the House of Commons and their reasonings for doing it. And basically, what it did was it separated us. We were no longer Canadians. Now we're Polish Canadians. Now we're Ukrainian Canadians. Now we're Chinese Canadians. And our tax dollars are going to building these little cultural centers for each one of these separate cultures, rather than us all coming together at the Rotary Club Park for Heritage Days. Now we have separated ourselves. Right? And it's to the point where our larger cities have cultural enclaves. And where folks have come, and they have not come to become Canadian. They have just come to be more of what they already were. We've got judges who are handing out sentencing based on culture, right? And oh my goodness, even like the language thing, the whole English-French thing. I mean, you speak of that Canada was one of the only countries that the English and the French stopped killing each other and were able to figure it out. They did. But that difference has been used to divide us as Canadians for many, many, many years, and especially since bilingualism became a part of Canadian policy, right? And we even saw that this last spring, where it breaks my heart, where we had that terrible incident with that Air Canada flight where we lost 2 young Quebecois pilots. And what did the government do? They did not use it as an occasion to bring us together. They used it as an occasion to divide us along language and to reprimand that poor CEO who gave his condolence speech in English and not in French. And why did they do that? They did that for political reasons. The Bloc Québécois, there was some by-elections coming up. The Bloc Québécois was looking pretty good for some of them. And the Liberal government had to show that they were for French Canadians and that they were going to defend the French language because those by-elections were coming up. So for political reasons, I believe that Canadians have purposely been divided and put into these little groups rather than us all being Canadian. He who shall not be named states that we're a post-nationalist state, that there is no Canadian norms. And I totally disagree with that. And I think that we see the Canadian norms alive in Alberta in many, many cases, as much as we can, living under the umbrella of a system that would like to keep us divided. So long answer to a short question.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it very much.
I learned some things.
Right?
I was like, whoa,
Right?
that's a good way of putting it.
Now, I suppose we should go around getting final thoughts before we, kind of wrap this up, because I know we could probably keep on going, but the point is to start the conversation, and so I believe we've started the conversation. And so, Angela, do you have some final thoughts that you want to
I do, yes, of course. So first off, Judy, you did mention, again, some questions about how's this going to be. There are conversations that are going on around the province in small, like in people's homes, but also in bigger ways. Basically exploring those ideas, and I welcome that and I love that. This is something very exciting for Albertans where we can dream, where we can look all around the world and see, okay, what has worked here? What has worked there? How could we bring that here and make this a better place, whether it's whether we stay in Canada or whether we leave and form our own nation. The other thing that I always want to remind people is that what we are asking people to do is not easy. It's a hard thing. So much of our identity is often wrapped up in our nationality, who we are. Many of our traits, I heard, it was Derek Fildebrandt who did an interview with Jason and Paula Levine. I think it was this morning that it played. And he said, I'm a hoser. Right? And as Canadians, we all know, okay, maybe some of us older Canadians know a little bit better, what a hoser is, right? And that was part of our identity, right? And so what we are asking people to do, to consider and to choose Alberta independence is not an easy thing. And we need to be cognizant of that. We need to understand that there are feelings involved in this. It's not just fact-based. There are feelings involved in this. And what I have seen and what I love the most about the Alberta independence movement is that it just feels like we're putting our arms around each other and we're saying, you know what? We got this. Whichever way this goes, we can do it together. And we do not need to be afraid. We've got each other's back. I just absolutely love that. And I cannot express enough how important that is. Especially after COVID, I cannot tell you how many women I have gotten emails from who say, I am alone. I am the only one who feels this way in my neighborhood. And I keep a list of all those ladies and I look them up and I go, actually, you're not alone, because I've gotten those same emails from women in your neighborhood. Let's put you together. Let's have you create a community. And that's what we need the most. We were isolated on purpose. We need to very intentionally come together. I believe that Alberta independence is a way that we can do that, as long as we're doing it with compassion, we're doing it with truth, and we're doing it with love.
Amen to that. And one thing that Macy, Mike, our dad, and we did a series on, so there's a document called The Value of Freedom, and it goes over the potential ways that we can transition into Alberta independence and actual steps we can take, good policy ideas we can put into the Constitution or just put generally into the bank, stuff like that, to deal with Indigenous, the RCMP, all of those things. And it's a financial breakdown, so we can actually start thinking about it, see if it's possible, rather than it being this scary unknown identity. Documents like these, like David Redmond's, actually outline, so it's a bit clearer of a picture rather than this big gray fuzzy thing that we don't know what's looking out for us. But in that document, one of the things that you were alluding to is this togetherness. I don't think that everybody's understanding when Albertans are talking about Alberta independence and separation, it is not leaving Canada, because it's putting us in a better position to be better Canadians, because a lot of people don't mind giving charity and sharing the wealth. But right now, if we think we're sharing a lot now, how much could we share if we were, without the regulations that the federal government's putting upon us? And one of the things that Macy, Dad, and I were coming up with was, and the first thing we can do is a good neighbor policy. And so we separate, and the first thing we do is that say, okay, now for the rest of the provinces that want to start standing on their own 2 feet as well, trade deals. Right away. We're allowed to do that now because we're our own nation, our own country. So we can do that immediately. So Alberta separating does not mean leaving Canada behind. It's actually, I think, expediting us to bring Canada back into a better state. And I think some Canadians don't remember that because there's this divisive rhetoric of East versus West. But even in Macy and I, like our episodes with Tanya, with John Bolton, there are Easterners that are saying, hey, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not, like, it's not East versus West. I'm in the East and I'm with you guys. And that's what I want everybody to keep in mind, is that independence doesn't mean West versus East. A lot of the Alberta independence people want to put themselves in a better position to bring the rest of Canada with us, and they don't believe we can do that within, but they have policies, and in these booklets there's already ways that they're thinking of how we can immediately bring them after our independence. That's just one thing I want people to think about, because this divisiveness is not working, and it's counterintuitive to what Albertans have been saying, the grassroots movements, and it's counterintuitive to what the higher ups are also saying. So, okay, Judy, your final thoughts.
I've really enjoyed this.
Yay!
That's
Yay!
good. Good taste in mouth. Sorry, it's not ice cream though. I really do feel
I know.
bad about
Next
that one.
next time we'll bring ice cream.
No, it's been interesting, and thanks for having me on and letting me chat.
Yeah. I have my closing remark then, because I also wanted to give something else that just popped up in my brain as we were discussing, is also, there's resources Maddie's alluding to that do kind of go into it, so
I'll put them in description.
It looks less gray, as in like people who are actually trying to think about the very questions you're asking, which is, well, what does it look like if we were to do that, right? And then they're like, well, let me try. And then there's also, I believe, the white papers that are coming out, by Angela. Do you remember the name of the organization that's doing that?
Let Alberta decide.
Yes.
So that's
and the Alberta Transition Council.
Alberta Transition Council.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's Keith Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dennis Kalma.
So they're doing one, the value of freedom was more of a financial draft, and this one's more of like, not just finances now, but actually a bit more like logistics and cultural stuff as well, that kind of goes into how do we do basically immigration and, police force and all of these things. So that goes into it as well. But then I guess my little tidbit as well would be, I wanted to address the one thing that Judy brought up about like, is independent Alberta going to basically eliminate all facets of corruption and human nature to, be self-centered and manipulate people? Fuck no. Hell no. No, absolutely not.
And I think if anybody claimed that,
you're an idiot.
You're
literally an idiot. I would say I'm an idiot if I ever claimed that. But I like what Angela kind of already answered it, and to some degree Maddie as well. When it comes to the idea of the education, like me and Maddie have already thought about it, and I'm like, okay, let's say the referendum question for Alberta separation kind of gets a little dead in the water, and even the ability for us to want to try and do this thing, right? What do we do? And I was like, we don't stop educating. Like that right. Doesn't end. That shouldn't end. And so it plays, Judy, into what it is that you're saying about the other provinces of also trying to wrap their heads around, well, what does better look like actually physically look like? And that's what I think Alberta has been trying to lead in the thought experiment. And that's why I liked the idea of what does Alberta independence look like? Not just because it was about being self-centered and leaving, because as Maddie alluded to, you can basically put on your own oxygen mask in the airplane when it's going down in order to make sure you put it on someone else. And so it's like, if Alberta can stand on its own 2 feet, then it can lead a way to show people how they could stand on their own 2 feet. And then that could, the trade deals, the coming together, the et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to the utopian vision that people might have of separatists thinking that this is going to solve all of our problems, it's just going to be an attempt to solve some problems. And it'll be an attempt to solve our specific problems, right? And then, as we've been alluding to this whole time, if we're not educated, though, it will go back to the way it was. With the American I guess, experiment has been the biggest tell of that. I mean, it's still quite young. I think it was some, old Chinese congressmen that were so they were asked a question, what do you think about the American experiment? And they're like, oh, they're still young, because there are civilizations that are much older than Western countries. And so but looking at them, right, there's still a lot of corruption that can happen, even though the beginning they were where we are, which is they were British subjects and they were under a feudalistic system where, as you were alluding to with the Maritimes, it's like when Ontario and et cetera were bringing in their goods, right, instead of us being allowed to develop our industry, right, that's feudalism. And so, and not much just changed since we aren't being able to develop our resources right now, right? But they were that. America was that. And then the founding fathers were like, we need something different. And so then they tried all the political avenues and they were like, it looks like we're going to have to get our hands dirty, right? And so then that's where they physically were like, we need to fight for our freedom and to build something different. And so then they did, but now look at where they are today. There's definitely corruption. Like lots of recent historical examples of how there's lots of corruption in there. And so then when I'm thinking about it, that's what me and Maddie have dedicated our channel to, which is we bring on the experts that have done their research into what does the risks of balkanization look like? What do the risks of staying where we are look like, right? Because if we aren't educated on it, then there's no way we can hold it accountable. But the thing that hits me home, and it's just me personally, it doesn't have to hit you now because as you said, you don't even know whether or not you are going to vote for the devil you know or the devil you don't know, because it was a good line and it was basically like, the devil that you don't know, how do you know it's a devil if you don't know it? And so I was like, oh, that's a great line, right? And so when I'm thinking about the prospect of the corruption, when we're talking about even the idea of government, and yeah, you can get some smaller groups and they can still do stupid shit, right? At the very least,
We almost went swear free.
When we're thinking about the tiny versus like the larger, as we were alluding to, this larger thing that we are now in, I didn't choose it, and neither did a lot of other Canadians. They didn't choose that. And what we've done from our research, a lot of things where the corruption has actually been in from the onset, right? And it doesn't mean it's not going to be in if Alberta was to separate. There's going to be bad actors that are going to want to pose like they are our friends when really they're not, right?
It's just easier to hold your local sheriff accountable than an entire...
It's easier to hold it accountable because at least Angela could go up to her counselor, knock on his door and say, hey, fucker, right? Like, you're not getting on my level.
I wouldn't
here.
say that, but I might want to.
No, but she would really want to. I'll say it for her. But that's kind of where I'm seeing it, where it's like, at least also you're giving me the choice to make my own mistakes. This was not my fault. Like, where Canada is, I didn't choose that, and neither did you ladies. I don't think you would have chosen the direction that we've gone in today. And a lot of people have been, fear-mongered into wherever it is that they've decided to be fear-mongered into to make it the way that they are. And I feel bad for them because that's not how it should be. And so then it's one of those, me and Maddie were thinking about it, and it's basically like, you can want to consult with people in order to try and make decisions, right? The problem is, there's nothing wrong with consulting. The problem is when you're trying to figure out how to have your own ideas as a person and how to press them against reality, is when there's the fear of your own ideas being in this world that you must consult always, in which case you're just a parrot, right? In which case you're not owning the fact that you are a living entity with a sovereign mind and can play out in the world, right? And so when you don't risk making a mistake for your ideas, when you don't risk, the potential corruption that could come, you also don't risk success either. You also don't risk being right either.
Wayne Gretzky, you lose 100% of the shots you don't take.
And so that's kind of my mentality a bit when it comes to this Alberta independence movement as well, is we could risk the corruption, and there's probably not a lot of getting around that because historically we can't, but we can choose to have our own negotiation in that, because right now we're negotiating with something that we didn't want to.
Are we negotiating?
We're not negotiating, that's for sure, and it's true. And the mechanisms were in place so that it's very difficult to, and it's not impossible. But again, that plays into the timeline thing. Is what I was thinking about. It's like, it's not possible, but it damn well feels impossible, at least for my generation, in this lifetime to try and do that. But in this lifetime, there is a possibility that we can risk making our own mistakes, but also risk being successful. And I think that would be something that would be worthwhile, personally.
Well, ladies, it's been so hard not to look at you guys. Like, I'm like,
I know. I have me and Judy, we've been connecting. Okay.
Well, I'm glad everybody enjoyed the conversation. I'm hoping this will be the first of many conversations since the conversation needs to be had. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yes.
So without further ado, this has been another episode of At Home with Holmes.